Hello, welcome to HomeStrung Jewelry. This is Debbie, and I have
This is Steve with HomeStrung Jewelry.
Steve with me today. We're doing a very basic video on the spiral weave, seed bead weave technique. We will show you two different ways that you can do this weave. I intend to include how to attach a clasp to the basic spiral weave, and I will show you how I add thread to my projects. We'll get right into this by telling you what you're going to need in the way of materials. First, you're going to need two different colors of a size 11 seed bead. For this project, I'm using an off-white pearl bead and a metallic rose gold for my two colors. The rose gold will be the core beads, and the off-white pearl beads will be the spiral or outer beads. I'm using a big eye needle just because it's the easiest needle for threading for me, but if you prefer beading needles, a size 10 or a size 11 should both work for a project and for this weave. I'm also using for my thread the 6-pound fire line in the crystal or white color. I find the 6-pound works the best with your size 11 seed beads. You can do this weave with a size 8. I usually move up to the 8-pound fire line when I choose to do that. And then of course you'll need some scissors for cutting your thread, and it doesn't hurt to have a ruler handy so that you can measure your project as you move along.
And I'm here to watch.
Steve's here to try to keep me in focus on the camera. I have a tendency to keep moving off camera, so I asked Steve if he would join me, and he's going to move my hands up if they pull back. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to set the clasp aside because that's something we will do at the end. I'm going to get my needle out. Because I want to show you how I add thread during this video, I'm going to take a smaller amount than I normally would take to start with. I'm going to measure off which is probably around 30 inches. That way I will run out before we get to the end of the bracelet, and I'll have to add thread, and I can show you how I do that. This is what I love the big eye needles for. See that eye?
Because it's a really big eye.
Yep, I just plop that thread right into it. So.
I'm sitting in the next room and I can see it.
Okay, as I mentioned, we've got two different colors of beads. The rose gold ones are going to be the core bead, and then the pearl ones will be the outer beads. They're the ones that spiral around the core bead. To start the spiral weave, you will pick up 4 of your core beads. In this case, it is the rose gold, and 3 of the outer or spiraling beads, so that you have 7 beads on your needle. Move them to the end of your thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail for weaving in your clasp when we're done. Now you want to needle back up through the 4 core beads, not the 3 that you added on, just the 4 core beads. Pull your needle nice and tight, and what will happen is that those 3 spiraling beads will fold over and lay down alongside of those 4 core beads. This is your first unit and the way you start the weave. From here on out, we're going to be picking up just 1 core bead, 3 of the spiraling or outer beads, and then what you're going to do is skip this very first core bead and needle up through the other 3 core beads. Pull your thread so that the beads move down nice and tight, and then make sure that you fold over the 3 spiraling beads so that they lay alongside the previous 3. And then you will need to needle up through that core bead that you just added so that you're in position for the next unit. So we have what I call 2 units, because you can see 2 sets of the outer or spiraling beads. Again, we pick up 1 core bead, 3 of the spiraling or outer beads, And we're going to needle up through the 3 end core beads. End means the ones coming or closest to where the thread is exiting. So we come up through those 3, pull them down into position, rotate those outer beads over, fold them over so they're laying right next to the others, and then needle through the core bead that you just picked up. And now we have 3 units on, which are the 3 spiraling beads here. It's a good idea in the case of the spiral weave to keep your beadwork fairly tight. Okay, pick up a new unit, which is
what's the core bead?
1 core bead, 3 of the outer beads. Come back and count down 3 of your core beads. That's where your thread is coming out. This one here, count 1, 2, 3, and you're going to needle up through those 3 beads. I'm going to have to rotate it a little bit to do that. So up 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Pull the beads down into position. Rotate those spiral beads so that they're aligned right next to the previous set of 3. Needle through the core bead that you just added and pull your work pretty tight. As you can see, what's happening is we've got a squiggly line kind of going on with the core beads, but these outer beads are spiraling around it. And that's all there is to the basic spiral weave. We're going to keep doing this until we have the length that we desire. And for this bracelet, I'm going to need about a 7-inch length, and then I will add the clasp. So I pick up the metal core bead, the 3 outer beads, come back and needle through the end 3 set of core beads here. Pull my work down. See, they're not wanting to lay, so I just kind of push them over with my thumb here. Needle through that core bead that I just added. And pull my work tight. So this is the way I prefer to do this weave. There is another way, which I'm going to show you now, a second technique. It accomplishes exactly the same thing, but just in a slightly different way. And for many weavers, I know they prefer this alternate way. How you do with it is you pick up your core bead, you pick up the 3 outer beads. Now you move all them down your thread so they line up like this. You can see that. Then you bring your needle around and you're going to go through the 3 previous beads and that core bead you just added. Make sure you don't go through the outer beads. Pull your thread around, line up that spiral so it's part of your spiral, but this time you don't have to go through that end core bead because we already did it. Okay, so again, the second way to do this is you pick up the 1 core bead, the 3 outer beads, 1, 2, 3. Move all of them down the thread. And then count down 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the 3 beads from the previous and the new one you just added. And you go up through all 4 beads together, pull the thread tight, make sure you move your spiral into alignment. And there are many who find this version a lot easier than the first one. One more time, we're going to pick up 1 core bead, 3 outer beads, move them down the thread till they line up here, and then go up through the 4 core beads. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pull the thread tight, get the tail out of there, and make sure the spirals are falling into line the way you want them to. Okay, so that is both versions of how to do this spiral weave. I'll show you version 1 one more time. You pick up the core bead, the 3 outer beads, I leave them on my needle, and I needle up through 3 of the previous core beads. Pull my thread through, all the way through. Make sure that my spiral beads line up next to the other, and needle through that end core bead that I just added. So that was the first way, the first version. Second version, you pick up the 1 core bead, the 3 outer beads, you move them down your thread till they're on line where you've ended. Then you bring your needle back and through 4 of the core beads. Pull the needle tight. Make sure that you've rotated the spirals so they're laying next to the others, and you're ready to pick up your next unit. So if you've given both of these techniques a try and you feel more comfortable with one over the other, just continue using the technique that you're most comfortable with until your bracelet is about maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch smaller than you want it. Or that 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch is to allow for your clasp. So I'm going to put it on a speed up or do it off camera or whatever Steve decides we're going to do here until I have approximately 7 inches of this spiral weave.
Now, would you normally mix the 2 different techniques like that?
I wouldn't normally do it. I did it because I wanted to see what the difference was between the 2 techniques.
Does it look any different?
It does not look any different. It's just a question of which is more comfortable, I think, to do. So
okay, I think we'll just jump to the end then.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go until I run out of thread, because as I promised in the beginning, I want to show them how I attach threads when I'm running out. So
okay, well, we'll jump to that point then.
We're back to show you how I attach a new working thread to my working thread. I have 4 inches left on this working thread. I got around 3 to 3 1/4 inches of my weave done, but I need to attach a new thread to this now. Most of the people that I have seen show how to do this will finish off this thread by weaving it in and putting in a series of half hitch knots, and then they will attach their new thread, making sure they come out through the same bead that this one has ended up exiting out, using a similar technique, weaving through several beads, tying some half hitch knots, just making sure that they exit at this location, and then they continue with their weave. Well, Steve will attest that I tend to do things different. Just take a look at the way I do wired wrap loops. they're a very different way of doing them. And when I am a self-taught jewelry maker, and when I started learning to do bead weaving with seed beads, this is how I taught myself to attach a new thread. I have cut off my new length of thread, which is this one, which is another 36 inches. And here's my 4 inches of the ending thread here. What I'm going to do is tie a surgeon's knot as close to my end of my bead weaving as I can and still make it comfortable. So to do my surgeon's knot, I am going to cross over my 2 threads. And then I'm going to take the one that's underneath, which is on the right hand side right now, and wrap it around that thread that went over the top. Now to make it a surgeon's knot, I'm going to go left or right over left, and I'm going to go around once and then around twice, so that I've made 2 wraps on that. Pull it down to this thread here and pull them really tight. I want to pull on my 2 ends here and the 2 strings. Make sure nothing is moving or shifting, that is really, really tight. Otherwise it's going to pull out. Tight thing.
So you want it really tight then?
Really tight, really tight.
Not just tight, you want it really tight.
And then I don't need my tail ends being quite this long, so I'm going to trim them off, but I'm not trimming them real close to the knot. I'm trimming them probably 1 inch away from the knot. Then I'm going to restring the other end of the thread I just added through my needle. Yep, that did it. There we go. Maybe the other kind of needles would be easier.
No.
Okay, my knot is back up here. I wish, if I could change anything, it would be to have moved it down closer to my beadwork, but this should work just fine. And I'm just going to start up where I left off by adding more units to my spiral weave, picking up the core bead, 3 of these beads,
which are completely off camera,
needling back up through the end 3 beads here, pulling my thread all the way down. When it gets to that knot, I'm going to be kind of gentle and just kind of nudge that knot up through all the beads. Pull it tight. Move the beads over, thread through the core bead that I just added. And I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to fast forward through this until I actually get to the knot so that you can see what happens when the knot doesn't pull through the beads anymore. Okay, so I've just continued to do my weave up. Here's my knot right here. And my tails now with this last unit that I added are finally trapped down inside of these beads. So I'm just going to go ahead and needle through that end bead that was just added in the core bead that was just added in my last unit. My knot slips up around there just fine. I'm pulling on it. I'm just going to keep going. Eventually the knot itself will be hidden inside of the weave, and I'll just continue on with my thread. If my ends, my tails, were sticking out between a couple of the beads here, I would just trim them off, or I would burn them off with a fiber needle.
A blowtorch.
No, not a blowtorch. One of those little fiber needle things that just burns the end, melts. Yeah. It more likely it melts the end of your thread. So that is how I add thread to my bead weaving projects. So now I'm going to continue my weave until I have my just shy of 7 inches, and I'll show you how I attach the clasp. We're back to show you how I'm going to add a clasp to this spiral weave bracelet. As you can see here, I just managed to get, it's just shy of 7 inches. I like my bracelets a little bit snug, so I don't want to add any more to this bracelet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add this button clasp, which we showed you at the first, with a shank, metal shank ring on it. And to do that, I need a loop on this end. So I'm going to pick up 28 of my pearl size 11 seed beads to make a loop that will fit this button. Okay, if I counted right, that is 28 beads. And then what I'm doing is I've moved them all down right next to that last bead. And I'm going to go back around and I'm going to go through all 28 of my seed beads. Actually, I'm going to drop down one and pick up the core bead, which will make my loop just a smidgen bigger. But the reason for this is there's only one thread going through that core bead at this point in time, because it's the last unit core bead that I picked up. So by coming through it and then going through all the beads I just picked up, that at least will put 2 threads through that core bead, giving it a little bit more strength and stability. And if you know for sure how many beads your clasp takes, you can do it this way. And before I came back into the video, I tested to make sure that I knew it was going to take the 28 seed beads. So I've come back through all 28. I'm going to anchor back again through that end rose gold one, and I'm going to go through all 28 beads another time, just to show you, and maybe because I should double check, make sure that my button clasp is going to fit through that loop. See, fits through real nice. So I want to reinforce this again by going through all 28 of those beads I added again.
What about the first core bead?
I went through it again too.
So it's 29 beads. So
yeah, there are 29. You probably, this was not a real tight fit on that button. Since I changed my mind and went through the core bead, I probably could have dropped to 28 and still had it fit around the button.
I mean 27.
Or 27 and still have it fit around the button, but I think 28 is fine too. So now we have come through 3 passes through all those beads. It's a matter of personal preference at this point if you want to go ahead and finish your end off, or I prefer to err on the side of more security and more caution. I'm going to go through all of them one more time. So here I am coming through that core bead again. This will give me 4 passes through the core bead and then up through through the 28 that I added for my loop. If I can get my needle to fit.
We do this in order to support the thread industry by using more thread.
Yeah. Usually 3 passes are sufficient. This fire line is just about impossible to break, but I really do tend to err on the side of more security, more caution. Okay, coming back, I am going to go through that rose gold core bead. This will be the last time I go through it, because now I'm going to finish off. And to do that, I'm going to thread down through my 3 outer beads. And then I'm going to go under the bridge that's located right here, if I can get the needle to go under there. and do a half hitch knot. At least I know that's nice and tight. I'm going to needle down through a couple of the core beads. I'm going to go underneath the little bridge between those core beads. The camera can see it better than I can. Bring it down to a small loop, needle through the loop to tie a half hitch knot. I'm going to needle down through 3 of the outer beads. Then I'm going to find the bridge right between that next one. This will be the last half hitch one that I tie. Bring my thread over. Come up through the loop. Pull it really tight. And then I'm going to needle through 2 or 3 of the core beads. And cut my tail end. Okay, so that gives us the loop end for our clasp. Now we're going to go over to that 6-inch tail that we left at the very beginning, thread our needle onto it, and I'm just going to attach the button to this side. If I can get my big eye needle to open up, I'm going to...
This might be the hardest part of the whole project, is getting the needle threaded.
Usually I have an easy time getting these open. There we go. Okay, so the needle is coming out through the end core bead here. I'm just going to needle through the shank on my button, come around back through that core bead again. I'm going to needle through the shank, keeping it really tight, pulled tight, going through that end core bead again. So I'm through my shank twice. Going to come through it a third time, through the core bead, through the shank again, through my core bead. So I'm through this core bead 4 times. Bring this up, and now I'm going to finish off the same way I did the other end by weaving back through several of the beads and tying some little half hitch knots. I didn't leave quite 6 inches on this end. It kind of got sucked up. So here's a tip. Make sure that you've left a good 6 inches when you start this project. It'll make it a whole lot easier when you go to finish this off. There's my second one. Tie it. Oops, lost my needle. Nice and tight. Put the needle back on. Maybe we will put the needle back on. I seem to have more luck going this thumb.
Maybe we're done.
No. I am going to go through a couple more beads. These are pretty tight, so it should make for a pretty tight ending here. Anyway, needling through those, and then I'm going to trim off that tail end.
Yes, folks, when all else fails, force it.
Yes. And here's my bracelet. Of course, we're so close you can't see the whole thing.
Like coil it around.
But I will put it on. And I think this button is so pretty that I'm moving it so my button will be up on my wrist. There we go. So here's the bracelet. I appreciate your being here and watching this video. It is in preparation of a video that we're going to release very soon here.
Yes. Next, Debbie's going to show you how to add embellishment and doing it on a necklace. And you're not going to want to miss this. So just there's a link right here. Just click on this right now and it will take you right there to the next part of the video. There will also be a link down in the description because you're going to want to know how to add enhancements to the spiral weave.
What this does is I add beads, crystals, other embellishments, elements in that, and they're added right into the weave without having to break away from your weave to do something else. And I'll show you how to do that in that next project.
So just click on the link. Thanks for coming.
We'll see you later. Thank you.